Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have another episode in our Spoiler Spotlight series in which I talk about, well, spoilers and tell you what my thoughts are on them. But before that, just a quick reminder to click subscribe if you enjoy my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and your support means everything to me. And today we're going to be talking about Leyline of the Guildpact. For one Selesnya hybrid, one Simic hybrid, one Golgari hybrid, and one Gruul hybrid, it's an enchantment that says, if Leyline of the Guildpact is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Each non-land permanent you control is all colors, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. Now this of course is a throwback to the Leylines of the old Ravnica, and it's an interesting card because it has the same text where you can begin with it in play if it's in your opening hand. The hybrid mana might seem a little bit random, but it is all of the guilds that have green in the mana cost, so it's quite an interesting one. I'm not sure why they chose to do it that way, what the flavor is behind this, but those are the guilds that have been chosen. Now I've seen a ton of hype online about this card and how amazing it is, and honestly I don't really get it. I think it's an absolutely okay card, might even be good in certain strategies, but for the most part it's going to be pretty mediocre. Let's start by getting the most obvious thing out of the way, and that is that you're not always going to have this in your opening hand. When you have it in your opening hand, you're going to feel pretty good if your strategy relies around it, but if you don't, it might sometimes be quite difficult to cast. Other Leylines are actually fairly easy to cast for the most part, but this can be quite complicated if your mana isn't already very good. And if your mana is already very good, then why are you even playing this in the first place, unless you have some very specific synergies with it? So something I've seen people saying is like, this is a free Chromatic Lantern. And Chromatic Lantern is a card that, let's start off by saying, is not that great in the first place because you can just build a pretty good mana base and you'll never need the Chromatic Lantern. And if your mana base is really bad, it's only one of the cards of the 99, so you're not always going to have access to it. This has similar issues, but of course if it's not in your opening hand, it's definitely not better than Chromatic Lantern. It's more expensive and harder to cast than that card, which means that it's almost always going to be worse than Chromatic Lantern unless it's specifically in your opening hand. Being worse than a card that is okay is not exactly where I want to be. But in what kind of decks is this going to be a little bit better, and in what kind of decks is this going to see some play? Basically in decks where you care about your permanents having multiple colored types. So for example, if you're building a multicolored deck centered around Jared Carthalion, then this is pretty good because you're going to get to put 5 counters on whatever thing you target with his minus ability. Do note that it doesn't actually work with spells you cast, so it's actually not even good in decks that want spells on the stack to be multiple colors because that's just not going to work with this. Another situation where this can be good is in decks where you're playing a domain and you're caring about the different land types that you have in a deck. Sure, in that case this can be quite decent. However, again, that can be remedied by just running a better mana base and not running something that just does that one thing and costs you 4 mana to do it unless you have it in your opening hand. There is one more niche scenario where this can be quite good, although it doesn't really apply in EDH as much as in other formats, and that's because it does technically have 4 green mana cost in its mana value. So if you're trying to play some kind of devotion to green deck, you could theoretically bank on having this in your opening hand, and seeing as it's not legendary, you could have multiple of them in your opening hand. And at that point, if you manage to hit the lottery and play both of them, you could then use your Nykthos on turn 3 or whatever to make a ton of mana. That is very magical Christmas land, and it doesn't really work in Commander anyway, because why would you be playing mono green devotion in a 5-color deck? But you know, it is one of the small upsides of this card. So in general, I would say that the hype for this is very unwarranted. This is a very unexciting card. It does look very flashy and it has a very cool mana cost, but in fact what it actually does really isn't that good. And definitely don't pre-order this at an expensive price because I just don't see this card going anywhere. So there you have it. Those have been my thoughts on this new spoiler. What do you think about this card? Please let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.